two analysts, and one of those analysts made that point that if you're starting to see this kind of weakness elsewhere in the world, it could be an early tell on what's going to happen here. And another concern is in terms of their business, they have the traditional IP business, but the real weakness that they're talking about is on the enterprise side, down 5%, and then even more importantly, the commercial side, because that weakness that you're talking about abroad in EM, it could be coming here relative to consumers, because the commercial side, those are small to medium-sized enterprises. They're dealing with the consumer. They guided that business down even more. So it's sort of a signal that perhaps the strong consumer is maybe weakening a little bit.
So Abigail, you've been very careful in saying could. It may be. What do we need to be looking for that might indicate whether it really is as big as it might be, or maybe it's just idiosyncratic?
Well, I think that we're going to want to watch the next quarterly results in February, because in August they put up a poor quarter. The stock fell about 8%, the same amount today. Right now we have this terrible performance and the outlook cut. So if they miss an outlook, the cut outlook once again, because that's essentially what's happening here. They keep cutting and they miss their cut guidance. That would be, a signal at this point or at some point in the future that it's really pretty negative. But this is the sort of situation where you take the stairs up in the elevator down. We're getting the signal. It will come very quickly if it's clear.
Okay, thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle. We'll keep watching that. Up next, it's one of the most coveted and often unreliable voting blocks. It's college students. We're going to look at new data about the youth vote turnout in the midterms and what they could mean for 2020. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks are modestly lower as the market's record-setting rally stalls. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 68. The S&P 500 down 6. The Nasdaq Composite falling 33. Walmart is charging into the holiday season with the wind at its back. Third quarter same-store sales at U.S. Walmart stores rose 3.2% from last year, beating forecasts. Online U.S. sales rose 41%, topping the company's expected growth rate for the year. Canopy Growth, the world's largest cannabis producer, is down more than 16.5%. Report larger than expected quarterly loss that one analyst calls astounding. Revenue missed estimates. Baby boomers own too much stock. Fidelity Investments says boomers are leaving themselves vulnerable to serious losses in case of a meltdown. It recommends no more than 70% exposure to stocks for people 10 years away from retirement. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you are thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
We could call it Bloomberg awesome, but Bloomberg best is accurate and less embarrassing to say.
Analysts are raising questions about rising competition and higher costs.
June Grazo and Ed Baxter.
It is the first company to go public in the space tourism industry.
Bloomberg best.
That was AutoNation CEO Cheryl Miller.
Weekday evenings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we're going to go to Mark Crumpton.
David, the United States Congress is poised to write its support of Hong Kong's pro-democracy protesters into law. The Senate is pushing to expedite the passage of legislation that would put the city's special trading status under U.S. law under annual review. Meantime, Chinese President Xi Jinping says stopping violence and restoring order is Hong Kong's highest priority. Xi made remarks when he attended the BRICS summit in Brasilia on Thursday. His comments came after Hong Kong's government dismissed speculation it would impose a weekend curfew. Suspicions arose once a Chinese state-owned newspaper deleted a tweet saying authorities were gearing up to announce widespread restrictions. Venezuela is skirting U.S. sanctions with a recent boost in oil exports. Bloomberg has learned that Venezuela loaded 2 million barrels of oil onto a massive tanker under contract for Russian state oil giant Rosneft. The tanker's last GPS signal put the vessel in Western Europe, but the ship's transponders were turned off before it slipped into Venezuelan waters. The practice is becoming more common as shippers look to avoid penalties. Jurors have begun deliberations in the trial of Roger Stone. The longtime confidant of President Trump was indicted in January as part of special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian election tampering in 2016. He's accused of trying, or rather lying to Congress about his attempts to communicate with anti-secrecy website WikiLeaks. He's also charged with witness tampering and obstructing a House Intelligence Committee investigation. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks very much, Mark. In 2020, young Americans between the ages of 18 and 23 will be 10% of all of the eligible voters. And all of the presidential candidates are going to be trying to win them over. A new study from Tufts University shows that more and more of these young people are turning up at the polls come Election Day. Welcome now one of the researchers on that study. She's Nancy Thomas, director of the Tisch College Institute for Democracy at Higher Education at Tufts. She joins us today from Boston. So welcome. It's great to have you with us. Tell us what you looked at and what you found.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So our study is unique because we actually marry enrollment records with voting records, publicly available voting records, and that gives us a pretty enviable database. We work with over 1,000 colleges and universities in the country, and we have a database of 10 million college student records for each of the last 4 federal elections. So 2018 was pretty exciting for everybody who's in this work. The college student voting rate from 2014, the last midterm, to 2018 actually doubled. It was pretty significant. So in 2014, which happened to be a record low turnout rate, not just for college students, but for all Americans, the voting rate for college students was about 19%. In 2018, that number went up to 40%. So that's a 21 percentage point gain. Let me just put that in perspective for you. More Americans turned out in 2018 to vote, and that gain was 37 percentage points back, 37% back in 2014, up to about 50 in 2018. So that's a gain of 13 percentage points. For college students, that gain was 21 percentage points. So they're raring to go. They're ready to vote. They're going to be a formidable force.
So Nancy, let's go below the top line numbers if we can and do what we used to call in the polling area the crosstabs. What do you know about when you break it down, which college voters were more likely to show up, less likely to show up? How does it break down according to demographics, geography, other ways?
Sure. So it breaks down in interesting ways, and sometimes that is more of a function of, for example, where a campus is located. So, for example, rural college students vote at a lower rate, about 5 percentage points lower at about 35%. The most reliable college students on campus are black women, African American women. Their voting rates are higher than 40. They're more like 43, and then that's quickly followed by white women. So women are the most reliable voters on college campuses. One of the things that we saw in 2018 that we were very excited about was an enormous jump for Latina voters. So Hispanic women increased their voting rate by 23 percentage points. And so they're closing in at a voting rate of 38%.
So I know that when you do research like this, you try to hold all the variables constant. There are other possible factors that figured in, because I did see a piece a while ago in the New York Times said that Texas has experimented with actually opening polling stations at campuses that, in fact, there's an effort to shut down now because they really had an influx of voters. Was there a change in trying to get out the college vote last time?
Well, we do see some suppression, frankly, of the college student vote, and we saw some things happening, for example, in Florida that were sort of changes to the voting conditions that probably affected the voting rates in that state. For example, in Florida, what happened was the colleges and universities were entitled to have, the public institutions were entitled to have polling locations. And in March, before the election, the Secretary of State decided not to allow those polling locations to be on college campuses specifically. There was litigation, and that decision was reversed. But in some cases, it wasn't reversed fast enough for them to actually get those polling locations. Convenience is a tremendous factor for college students. Voting, frankly, it is for all Americans, but it really helps college students to have convenient access to polling locations and to information. For example, how to vote, what a ballot looks like, what the machines look like, things like that, particularly for students who are attending school out of state in a new place where the machines or the ballots might be very different.
And finally, Nancy, what you've been talking about is I would describe as quantitative research. Is there any qualitative research, either by you or by others, that would indicate what is motivating voters to come out? Because, for example, the polls we've seen in Iowa thus far actually have Pete Buttigieg in third place among the young voters. You might think he'd be in first place because his age is closer to them, but actually he's trailing Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Do we have any sense of what's actually motivating them to come out and vote?
Well, certainly candidates matter, and some of the candidates are more compelling to college students than others. I think that there were quite a few factors in 2018. One of them was that we saw a real change in attitude by campus administrators and leaders towards voting. That's partly due to the fact that our study, we not only measure college student voting rates, but we provide each campus with its own student voting rate. And so when they saw the low numbers, they were pretty stunned, particularly back in 2014, where the voting rate for 18 to 24-year-olds was only 13%. That's only barely more than 1 in 10. So campus administrators really stepped up, and at the same time, students were very motivated. They were motivated not only because they weren't happy with the current administration, they don't like some of the rhetoric and some of the divisiveness that's going on, but they also are motivated by issues such as the environment. We saw a lot of young people mobilizing around gun violence. DACA and immigration is a motivator for this particular age group. And obviously some candidates are going to be more appealing than others to young people. So we'll see what happens. The pool is still pretty big, and I think there's a lot that can happen.
Fascinating research. Thank you so much, Nancy. It was really interesting to talk with you. That's Nancy Thomas. She's director of the Tisch College Institute for Democracy and Higher Education. Coming up here, he was one of the first to advocate for a wealth tax. We talk with presidential candidate Tom Steyer about why he thinks that's the way to go. That's next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
You're not supposed to begin the race.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's hard to enjoy your daily yoga routine when your mind is on your next VAT return and how to avoid the usual mistakes. But with QuickBooks, the new VAT Smart Scan technology does the work for you. As the deadline approaches, it checks for duplicates, looks for anomalies, and reviews VAT codes. So your biggest struggle is touching your forehead with your ankle.
Search for QuickBooks, perfect for making tax digital. QuickBooks, backing you.
It's one small step for man, one giant shop. Sorry, 2 giant shops a month at 10% off with the new Tesco Club Card Plus. Oh, and double data from Tesco Mobile, all for $7.99 every month.
New Tesco Club Card Plus. Value you can't stop talking about. Subscribe online today. £200 max spend per shop, in-store spend only, Club Card app required, exclusions apply, double data only on pay monthly, home from home destinations. First payment payable up front, subject to status, see online for details.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update.
New Weekly Magazine says Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom are considering getting married in Egypt because they enjoyed their vacation there so much. Speaking of weddings, Naughty Gossip claims Jennifer Lopez is allegedly trying to get someone to pay for her wedding. A source tells the website there's no way she is paying for that wedding and even less chance of her wasting one of the biggest press days of her life without harnessing it to help her business. To hear music from Katy Perry and Jennifer Lopez, search today's hits on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s,
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations,
Live commercial-free news,
and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game.
Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet and scores us down.
The top of the Big 12 is at stake. Reigning champion Oklahoma travels to Waco, Texas to take on the surprising undefeated Baylor Bears. The action kicks off this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Listen to every call and every game of your school all season long for free on TuneIn. Just search college to listen today.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update.
Billboard.com did a CMA Awards 2019 predictions. Their experts picked who should win and who will win. Probably. Although I think the whole world knows one slam dunk is Carrie Underwood winning Entertainer of the Year. Meanwhile, Reba McEntire is going on tour next year. She'll kick it off on March 20th in Evansville, Indiana, and take it into early May. You can grab details at Reba.com. To hear more music from Carrie Underwood and Reba, search Country Roads on TuneIn.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut it.
The sideline, the Van Fleet for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right.
NBA today to start listening.
Hey NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can hear every NFL game live as it's happening, or catch it later on demand, anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Met action. You know, if you look at, I basically am saying this government's broken, that it stopped working for the American people. And really what I'm talking about is getting back that government. That's what I'm talking about on the trail. I want Americans to give me a mandate to go break the corporate stranglehold on our government and get back to government of by and for the people. That's one thing. And I've said I would declare a state of emergency on climate on day one. I'd make it my number one priority. I'm the only person in this race who will say that. And I think I'm saying we have to do it. We can solve it. And we can solve it in a way that recreates America in a really good, positive way.
We're talking with Tom Steyer, candidate for president. And when you are trying to redo the fundamental structure of the government, which is what you have said you really want to do, you think our governance is broken. Do you see support for that broadly across the country? I mean,
oh, gosh, yes.
Do you? Because we just heard Chairman Powell, Jay Powell, testify in front of Congress and talk about the problem we have with the debt and the deficit. He said there needs to be a consensus across the country, a broad consensus with some courage to address our debt situation, and yet we don't see it.
Look, I'll say this. I'll tell you a story. So I was probably 3 weeks ago in northern New Hampshire, and a young guy, 25 years old, named Frankie, was doing me a favor. He was opening up the gym so I could work out at 11 o'clock at night. So we're walking down the hall, and he goes, "Why are you running for president, Tom?" And I said, "Well, Frankie, I'm really, the government's been bought by corporations, and we got to take it back." And he goes, "Well, I'm only 25 years old, and even I know that." And everybody in the United States knows this is true. Everybody. And so it's just a question of deciding together that we're going to take it back. We really have to take it back. And if we take it back, and if we stabilize the climate crisis, we're in a fantastic position. But we have two real challenges. We have to call them out, and then we have to, as you said, take action and succeed. And if you look, for the last decade, I've been taking action and succeeding in terms of pushing for the rights of Americans against the rights of corporations.
So the wealth tax, whether the one you propose or other people propose, has gotten a lot of attention, not all of it favorable. There's been a lot of criticism of it, not only by Republicans. I mean, we have people like Larry Summers, who's not a Republican, coming saying, would say he thinks it's a foolish idea. It's a distraction for progressive wing. There are other ways to get the money that are more effective and are constitutional. What do you say to Larry Summers, who takes issue with you?
I think that he's missing the point, honestly. I think that there's a suite of things that have to change from a tax standpoint. It's not just one thing. This is one of the things. But I've said, we're on Bloomberg TV. I've said, I don't think Mike Bloomberg should run unless he's willing to embrace a wealth tax. That there's something fundamentally wrong here in terms of how we're splitting up money in this society. Fundamentally wrong, really unjust, really undemocratic, and not sustainable. And we've really got to go after it, and I think the Democratic Party has to own it. And whoever's the standard bearer, whoever wants to be a standard bearer for the Democratic Party, particularly someone who's had great success and has a ton of money, I've said I embrace it. I think he has to embrace it, or he really can't represent this party.
And as you can understand, I don't want this to be about a particular individual. I know the idea of the wealth tax and the merits of the idea of the wealth tax. You have a different approach from Elizabeth Warren, from Bernie Sanders. You don't go quite as far.
I start lower.
Yeah, you start, and your rate is not as high. Elizabeth Warren now has doubled her rate, as I understand it. Give us the analysis there.
Look, Elizabeth Warren doubled her rate as an attempt to show that how she could possibly pay for Medicaid for all. My opinion about this is we do need to raise money for for social programs. As you point out, we have $1 trillion deficit at full employment based on tax cuts. It's absolutely unacceptable. You know, as proof really to me, those tax cuts went to the richest Americans. We did $1 trillion tax cut for the richest Americans, and now we have a huge deficit. That just doesn't make any sense. Look, I'm saying in the 21st century, Americans have rights. Americans have rights that are not being recognized. You know, at this point, Americans have a right to affordable health care. A right. It exists. Didn't exist when we started, it exists now. We have a right to quality public education starting with pre-K. Didn't exist when we started the country, it exists now. A right to clean air and clean water, no one ever thought about it before, but it exists. And a right to a living wage. I mean, if you look at what's happened to wages in this country, and I'm sure you have gone back and looked, it's an outrage. And when you go around the country and you see the people, how hard they're working, how diligent people are, how idealistic they are, and how unrewarded they're being, it's outrageous.
Yeah, it breaks down actually about 1980, actually, from World War II up to 1980.
It was pretty much a fair split.
Exactly, and after that,
and you meet people who are just wonderful people doing their jobs faithfully, diligently, idealistically, and not getting any reward for it. It's outrageous.
We're talking with Tom Steyer, presidential candidate. We first got to know you as a very successful investor and then an environmentalist. But let's put your investor hat on, your businessman hat on for a moment. Big tax increases, whether it's Elizabeth Warren's or Bernie Sanders or Tom Steyer's, will slow down the economy according to most people's thinking. Now, whether we should have cut the taxes or not a couple of years ago, are you willing to take a hit on the overall growing of the pie in order to redistribute?
Look, I don't think it's going to cause a big slowdown. I honestly don't. Let me put it the other way. Mr. Trump does a lot of things, and the Republicans have proved to go along with a lot of very short-term thinking. And so when I think about what actually creates prosperity, what actually creates value on a societal basis, the number one thing to me is investing in Americans. You know, I look at education, that's not an expense to me. If we're educating young people in a way so they're productive members of society for 40 years or 50 years, that's the best investment we can make. Republicans are always cutting education because they think it's an expense. I think that investing in research across the board has an incredible return to us. Mr. Trump is always trying to cut research because it doesn't pay off right away. You know, we're seeing him do things. He has a very short time scale. He does things that hurt us over the long run, that help him over the short run. It's wrong. I mean, when you think about what creates value in this society, it's Americans being productive, Americans investing in each other and becoming more productive together and creating something great. Not in short-term, tax cuts that create big deficits that give you a short-term burst. And it didn't work. And there was always this claim that it was going to go to investment, and that was a lie. Anyone who'd studied the last 40 years knew that when they gave that tax cut, it wasn't going to go to investment because there was more than enough money for investment. And they weren't going to share it with the workers because they've never shared it with the workers. It was kind of like, you can say whatever you want, but we have 40 years of data that say what you're saying is a bunch of hokum. Tom, you know it, David.
It's really great to have you here, always, Tom. It's really good to talk with you. That's Tom Steyer. He's Farallon Capital founder and 2020 presidential candidate. And a quick disclosure, we did talk about Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Bloomberg says he has not made a formal decision on whether he will run for president at this time. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
There are excited by business changes.
Are you finding the talent that you need?
They're thrilled by tech developments.
What would surprise people about where AI is going?
But what really makes Carol Masser and Jason Kelly happy is telling you about all of it.
This is an industry that is in demand.
Bloomberg Business Week.
What will society ultimately decide?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston. China's President Xi Jinping is calling for an end to the violence in Hong Kong, saying restoring order in the city is urgent. Xi's comments come after the increasingly violent protests have closed public schools and forced some companies to tell employees to remain at home. Earlier, China's state-owned Global Times newspaper deleted a tweet in which it had reported that Hong Kong's government was expected to announce a curfew. Joining us now with more is the host of Bloomberg's Daybreak Asia, Sherry An. So great to have you on, Sherry. Thank you for doing this. You know this story so well. What are you watching?
I'm really watching closely what Beijing could do next, because the key question has been until now, what can they do when the violence keeps escalating, right? So we have heard now from President Xi Jinping commenting during his trip in Brazil, again saying that they will continue to firmly support Chief Executive Carrie Lam. That was a key question. How long can they continue supporting Carrie Lam, whose popularity has fallen, has plunged to the lowest among all chief executives in the past? So they're also talking about punishing violent criminals. So I would really pay attention to the fact that they keep calling for these, what they claim are rioters, to be punished. And this, of course, as you mentioned, coming on the back of those rumors that there would be a curfew this weekend. The Hong Kong government has come out and said that those rumors are totally unfounded.
Do they have the police force necessary to handle the difficulties?
That has been a key issue right now, because we are seeing these protests that are very different from what happened 5 years ago, where the protests are sporadic. They're all across Hong Kong. It's in a wide range of locations, mostly focused around university campuses as well. But interesting, Beijing now hinting through their state-run media that the violence is only a short drive away from the Shenzhen Armed Forces, also a short walk away from the People's Liberation Army in Hong Kong. Now, we have more response also coming out of the U.S. saying that Beijing should consider the likely costs of any additional measures to undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. That coming from the U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China, which reports to both Congress and the President on China's human rights.
Yeah, fascinating and very troubling story. Thank you so much, Sherry. Really great to have you with us here. That's Bloomberg's Sherry An, who is an anchor of Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we're going to talk with Congressman John Yarmuth. He is chairman of the Budget Committee. That's the committee before which Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, just testified. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. A Patek Philippe timepiece sold for $31 million at Only Watch, the highest price for a wristwatch in auction. The Steel Grandmaster chime, which has 2 dials and 20 special functions, went under the hammer after a 5-minute bidding war. In other watch news, it wasn't a Patek, but an Audemars Piguet that was crowned Best Watch of the Year at the 2019 CPHG Awards. The Swiss timepiece, a Royal Oak self-winding perpetual calendar ultra-thin, is made from titanium with a platinum bezel, and as the name implies, is impressively thin. In New York, a brass and copper bathtub shaped as a golden hippo sold for $4.3 million at Christie's, returning almost 2,500% to its owner. The tub was among the quirkier items offered during the semi-annual auction week. It's targeting sales of $1.2 billion at the low end of the estimated range. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Intellectual property, one of the most valuable things we market in Asia.
I understand you're trying to rival the likes of San Francisco, New York.
We have our own brand of intellectual property.
Let's focus first on this U.S.-China trade story.
Find out why it's so valuable.
Do you need to see substance in an agreement or just that they stop shouting at each other?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey, because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. It is now 1 p.m. on Wall Street, and the equity market is trading lower. A couple of concerns here for stocks, one of which is some mixed economic data along with growing concern over a partial trade deal. Overnight, we had some weak data for the Chinese economy. Bloomberg Intelligence was saying, though, it shows deceleration, not a collapse. Even so, it kind of reinforces this idea on the trade war weighing more broadly on the global economy. Tech shares are being hurt by the weak earnings from Cisco. Last night after the bell, Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins was pointing to political events in Hong Kong, China, Washington, and the UK for helping to produce a lack of clarity and then a drop in business confidence. Right now, shares in Cisco are trading down by 7.5%. Dave Wilson is with us looking at American depository receipts. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Doug. ADRs are falling more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 0.5%, while the S&P 500 is lower by less than 0.1%. And to pick up on what you were saying about Cisco Systems, we're seeing Sweden's Ericsson down 1.2% and Finland's Nokia down 3.3% in U.S. trading. Both companies make phone network equipment, and they've declined in the wake of that set of results you mentioned from Cisco. And like I said, the stock down now 7.6%. China's Weibo has declined almost 17%. The social media company's revenue projection for the fourth quarter trailed analyst average estimate in a Bloomberg survey. And ADRs of Weibo's controlling shareholder, Sina, have lost even more. They're down almost 18%. Now, the Netherlands' QIAGEN has gained 5.9%. The maker of genetic testing equipment is up for a second day in response to a possible takeover. People familiar with the matter said Thermo Fisher Scientific, based here in the U.S., approached QIAGEN about a potential purchase. Now, that story came out yesterday, and that day, QIAGEN rose 9.9%. And Norway's Opera has climbed 16.5%. The developer of an internet browser reported third-quarter earnings and revenue that were well above the average estimates, Doug.
All right, thanks to Bloomberg's Dave Wilson. In the bond market right now, the U.S. 10-year Treasury is yielding 1.80%. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Balance of Power and David Weston.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Hong Kong demonstrations shut down much of the city. Chile's economy slows by half because of civil unrest. And Fed Chair Jay Powell concludes his second day of congressional testimony. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. Fed Chair Jay Powell spent his second day in a row testifying in front of Congress, this time in front of the House Budget Committee. And he was called upon to really assess the state of the U.S. economy. He basically said it is a star.
The U.S. economy is the star economy these days. We're growing at 2%, right in that range. So more than any of the other advanced economies are growing, and that's there's no reason to think that can't continue. There's no reason to think that I can see that the probability of a recession is at all elevated at this time. So our forecast is, and our expectation is very much one of continued moderate growth, a strong labor market, and inflation close to our 2% objective.
We are pleased now to welcome the chairman of that committee, the House Budget Committee. He is Congressman John Yarmuth of the state of Kentucky. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us. You listened to that testimony before Jay Powell. Do you come away feeling better about the U.S. economy?
Well, I've felt fairly good about the U.S. economy. The one thing that I and many of my Democratic colleagues have a problem with, and this is really not the Fed's primary responsibility, is that while the economy overall is doing fairly well, that there are a lot of people who are being left behind. And while people at the lower end of the income spectrum have done pretty well the last couple of years in terms of increase, the gap between the wealthy and everyone else is still unacceptably high. So we don't think the strong economy is sharing its benefits across the board as well as it should. But I think we all are very heartened to hear that he doesn't see any signs of an imminent recession, which is good news for sure.
And Chairman Powell, as you know so well, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Powell was asked about the issue of inequality and what might be done about it. And as I understood him, he was basically saying, you know what, that's up to the Budget Committee. I'm not going to give you tax policy. Is there any prospect of the Budget Committee coming out with something that might address that issue?
Well, of course, we've passed now over 400 bills in the first year of our majority, sent them to the Senate. There are a number of them that actually deal with income inequality. There will be more. And, of course, Mitch McConnell has said he's the Grim Reaper, and he's not acting on much of anything over there except judicial nominations. So we're very focused on efforts to try and spread the benefits of a good economy equally across the population base, and we're very, very focused on trying to do something about income and wealth inequality. I'm not in the Elizabeth Warren wealth tax team yet. I'm not on that team, but there are things that we can do in other ways with the tax code and with other kinds of programs, expanding earned income tax credit and others that can help narrow the gap some, and we're focused on that.
Democrats have been very critical of the tax cuts that were promulgated by the Trump administration, saying it really went disproportionately to corporations in the top end of the spectrum. There are reports now the administration might be thinking about what they call call middle-class tax cuts to try to keep the economy going. Would there be any appetite for that to maybe redistribute by cutting taxes of some of the more moderate income people?
Well, I'd certainly be open to looking at that, but right now we still have a revenue problem, and unless we would finance that middle-class tax cut by rolling back some of the 2017 tax cut, I don't think that would be the right policy at this point. And the fact remains that when you look at the distribution of taxes, particularly on the income tax side, probably close to 70% of people who file income tax returns don't pay as much as in income taxes as they pay in payroll taxes. So I'm not sure how much room there is to cut taxes that would make that significant a difference.
And Congressman, as you know, Chair Powell was asked specifically about the issue of debt, and he raised it yesterday and today, both, and the extent to which we're going in debt. Again, he said that's really up to Congress to address. Is there appetite in the Budget Committee more broadly to address the question of the nation's debt?
Well, I'll make 2 points on that. One is he did say that, and that we are at an unsustainable level, and I don't think you'll find much disagreement on that among Republicans or Democrats. What he also said was, though, that this is not a near-term problem, that this is something that is not going to be a problem, a serious problem, for 20 and maybe 30 years. So there are ways to approach it that are politically doable, and there are ways to approach spending, for instance, that are not politically doable. And unfortunately, the side of the spending ledger that Congress controls on an annual basis, what we call discretionary spending, which is about a third of the budget, we're spending $100 billion a year more now than we did in 2011 when we passed the Budget Control Act. So that spending has not gone up appreciably. It's just basically it's not gone up as inflation. The other side of the budget is where the problem is. That's the mandatory spending, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt, although interest on the debt is not a real problem right now. So we've got to look at ways to drive down the cost of health care in the country. That's the biggest driver. That and demographics with Social Security. Those are the biggest drivers of our debt now and our deficit. And we saw in October we ran a deficit of $134 billion, which is 30% more than it was in October of last year. So the situation's not getting any better. And but again, where the real problem exists, there's never been, and there probably won't be for a long time, a willingness to do on a bipartisan basis what it takes to get a handle on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
Yeah, and in fact, as we go into a political year, I don't think I've heard any candidate of either party really say we've got to make debt a priority.
No, it's an interesting phenomenon. Certainly when President Obama was president, that's all we heard out of the Republicans was we got to do something about the debt. And now that they have the White House, we're not hearing that at all. Not even from, I think even Mick Mulvaney, who was probably the biggest deficit hawk when he was in Congress, is now saying, well, people don't care about the debt. He didn't say he didn't, but he said people don't care about it. And I think particularly from a political perspective, he's absolutely right.
Briefly here at the end, Congressman, what about the USMCA, the successor to NAFTA? Because that came up, trade uncertainty. Are the Democrats going to get that through?
I think so. We had a leadership meeting yesterday, and we heard that they think they're down to just a very few issues, and these are all on the enforcement side. I think everybody on our side, as well as the Republicans, believes that the provisions in the new USMCA are a vast improvement on NAFTA, and certainly would be much better than doing nothing. We got to make sure the deal can be enforced, and that's what we're focused on.
Okay.
But they say we're very close.
Okay, we'll keep our eye on that. Many thanks to Budget Committee Chairman John Yarmuth of the great state of Kentucky. Coming up, we're going to talk about day one of the impeachment hearings with Bloomberg Opinion's Jonathan Bernstein. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Directors of companies are responsible to boards.
Let's begin with the IPO that may not be for a long, long time.
time.
Politicians are mindful of voters.
Are those gains all going to the elite?
Scholars pay attention to data.
Does it spread beyond manufacturing?
And nearly everyone at the top of these professions listens to Bloomberg Surveillance.
Everybody listens when I'm on your show.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap, the give, Jones up the middle, runs it back. He's to the 10, to the 5, to the end zone, touchdown.
This Thursday, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Getting pressure again, rolls to his right. He's going to run with it. He's the 5. He got it.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing right corner three. Another
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season so you can be matters. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s,
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Let's get you caught up on market action here at 17 past the hour. Right now, a mixed picture for U.S. equities. We have the Dow and the S&P 500, each down from record highs by about 1/10%. NASDAQ Composite weaker by about 1/10% as well. We had some mixed economic data earlier today and growing concern over a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. And then overnight, a round of eco data for the Chinese economy that was a little weak. Bloomberg Intelligence pointing out it really indicates more deceleration as opposed to an outright collapse. But it does nonetheless reinforce the idea that the trade war is weighing on the global economy. In terms of long-term interest rates today, a big move in the U.S. 10-year. We're down 8 basis points in yield to 1.80%. Many of the tech stocks are on the back foot today after Cisco Systems reported weak earnings. We had CEO Chuck Robbins last night pointing to a lot of political events around the globe, particularly Hong Kong, China, Washington, and the UK, as for helping basically produce a lack of clarity and a commensurate drop in business confidence. Cisco shares right now weaker by about 7.5%. Earlier, we heard from Fed Chair Jay Powell. He was on Capitol Hill calling the American economy a star performer. He also voiced solid confidence in the record expansion staying on track. Right now in the currency market, the dollar slightly weaker against the majors, but a rally in the Japanese yen at 108.35 against the dollar. That is a gain of about 0.4%, which is going to weigh on the Japanese equity market later on in the Friday session in Tokyo. You're caught up on markets. Back to Balance of Power and David Weston.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power, and it's time now for Bloomberg Opinion. Today, we welcome columnist Jonathan Bernstein. So, Jonathan, we had the first day of open hearings on the impeachment yesterday. We're going to have another one tomorrow. I've been following in part by just reading your opinion pieces, which are coming out fast and furious. What have we learned so far?
Well, two things. First of all, the Democrats have finally figured out how to hold a hearing. You know, over the course of the year, there have been a bunch of attempts by the Democrats to do that, and they've sort of botched it. And as the year has gone on, they've gotten a little better. And yesterday, they sort of ran a smooth hearing. They laid out the evidence that they had. They didn't get tied up into procedural knots. They learned how to deal with Republican objections. They learned how to sort of just show anyone who was watching exactly what they had to say and what the witnesses had to say. And the second thing, of course, is that the witnesses had devastating things to say about Donald Trump and, laying out exactly what he did wrong and why it's wrong.
And does it appear that the Democrats are going to remain pretty much focused on the Ukraine story? That is to say, it's a question of whether the president withheld support and maybe withheld a meeting from President Zelensky of Ukraine tied to an investigation.
Exactly, and it certainly seems that the hearings tomorrow and then 3 days next week are going to be focused on that. To some extent, it does have some relationship to the Russia story and to other things, but there's no sign right now that the Democrats are going to be talking about emoluments or the president profiting off of his businesses through his political career, or sexual assault, or any of the other, many scandals that have come up for President Trump. These hearings are at least for now, are narrowly focused on the Ukraine story.
So that's the Democrat strategy as it's unfolding. Let's talk about what the Republicans are doing. In part, it appears they're just saying it's all a sham. There's no point in paying attention to it. In fact, the president yesterday in his press conference with President Erdogan of Turkey said he wasn't even paying attention. Listen to what he said.
I haven't watched for 1 minute because I've been with the president, which is much more important as far as I'm concerned. This is a sham and shouldn't be allowed. It was a situation that was caused by people that shouldn't have allowed it to happen. I want to find out who is the whistleblower.
So normally, Jonathan, you might think that would be a dangerous strategy, but is it working with the American people? Are the American people changing their minds on this?
Well, it's early to tell. What happened is, as soon as the story broke and Democrats moved to the impeachment inquiry, most people who dislike Donald Trump for other reasons sort of fell into alignment on that, so that you have impeachment basically going from a very unpopular idea to one that is marginally popular. The question is what happens next. And President Trump's overall approval ratings so far have just barely fallen off since the story broke. The question now is whether these high-profile hearings, which are getting a lot of attention, are going to further push his approval ratings down or not. I would guess that feelings about impeachment will follow the approval ratings.
Well, and the question in part is, does it need a smoking gun beyond what's already been revealed? The president sort of revealed what some people thought was a smoking gun right at the beginning by revealing that modified transcript or something. Is it going to take some other major development to really shake the core support for him? Because in your columns you say there has to be a substantial erosion of Republican support.
That probably is what it would take. Certainly, to get 20 votes in the Senate for removing him, 20 Republican votes, which is what it would need if all the Democrats vote that way. We don't see anything right now that shows that would happen, and that would probably take his approval ratings falling. It wouldn't necessarily take a huge hit. They don't necessarily have to go down to where Nixon was when he was removed, which was about 25% removal. Once he gets below 40%, he's right now around 41%. If he's well below 40% removal down to 35 or so, that's not very far, but that would make his reelection much more iffy, and it would make a lot of Republicans start to really worry about a possibility of a landslide wiping them out.
And finally, Jonathan, what about the Republican response, which we saw some of yesterday, that it's hearsay? You said it was strong testimony, but don't they have a point that it was not anybody who spoke directly to the president and heard from the president what he was trying to do?
I don't think that's going to be a problem for Democrats moving forward, making the case, because, this was two witnesses who saw what they saw, heard what they heard. They're going to have other witnesses in. At some point, there is a limitation to how many people have spoken directly to the president, but some of that is because the president is blocking them from testifying. So, Mick Mulvaney, the White House chief of staff, has a lot of evidence of exactly what the president has said, but the president won't let him come up and testify. So that kind of, sort of catch-22 situation only leads more towards Democrats, at least, voting for impeachment. And I think people who look at it from the neutral standpoint say, if he has something, bring him down there.
Right. Okay, many thanks to Bloomberg Opinion's Jonathan Bernstein. You can hear more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPIN GO. In the meantime, Senator Elizabeth Warren calls for a federal perjury statute applicable to corporations' disclosures to the government. We talked with Brooklyn Law School professor James Fanto about that. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks are cutting their losses, though the market is still lower. Traders remain worried that U.S.-China trade talks may be stumbling. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 24, the S&P 500 down 1, the Nasdaq Composite is down 8. Americans are growing uneasy about the economy. Bloomberg's weekly Consumer Comfort Index fell last week to a 9-month low. Optimism tumbled among lower-income Americans for a 10th consecutive week. Free trading is good for Charles Schwab. Clients opened 142,000 new accounts last month, up 31% from September after the firm eliminated most commissions. It now holds 12.2 million brokerage accounts. The state of New Jersey says Uber owes it $650 million in unemployment and disability insurance taxes. Officials say Uber is misclassifying drivers as independent contractors. It's the latest attack on Uber's business model. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscription.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Billboard.com did a CMA Awards 2019 predictions. Their experts picked who should win and who will win. Probably. Although I think the whole world knows one slam dunk is Carrie Underwood winning Entertainer of the Year. Meanwhile, Reba McEntire is going on tour next year. She'll kick it off on March 20th in Evansville, Indiana, and take it into early May. You can grab details at Reba.com. To hear more music from Carrie Underwood and Reba, search Country Roads on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something else, the road to 2020 is on TuneIn.
What a night! And a complete earthquake. This was
Follow every step of the Democratic primaries while hearing the latest headlines from the White House with live 24-hour news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News Talk, and more.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
Experience the election through the sources you trust with the nonstop news channels on TuneIn.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update.
New Weekly magazine says Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom are considering getting married in Egypt because they enjoyed their vacation there so much. Speaking of weddings, Naughty Gossip claims Jennifer Lopez is allegedly trying to get someone to pay for her wedding. A source tells the website there's no way she is paying for that wedding and even less chance of her wasting one of the biggest press days of her life without harnessing it to help her business. To hear music from Katy Perry and Jennifer Lopez, search today's hits on TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet and scores us down.
The top of the Big 12 is at stake. Reigning champion Oklahoma travels to Waco, Texas to take on the surprising undefeated Baylor Bears. The action kicks off this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Listen to every call and every game of your school all season long for free on TuneIn. Just search college to listen today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to talk with law professor James Fanto about the liability of public corporations for their disclosures to the government. But first, let's get a market check with Doug Krisner.
David, we're seeing weakness in stocks right now. The major indices moving lower given some mixed eco data along with growing concern over a partial trade deal. And add into the mix some weak economic data for China overnight, although Bloomberg Intelligence indicating that it shows deceleration, not collapse. Dow Industrial Average right now down from a record high by 0.1%. Similar decline for the S&P, which is also off from a record. And in the NASDAQ market, the composite index weaker by a little more than 0.1%. Some of this tech weakness that we are seeing today was precipitated by weak earnings last night from Cisco, and then CEO Chuck Robbins pointing out that political events, places like Hong Kong, China, Washington, and the UK are helping to produce a lack of clarity and a commensurate decline in business confidence. Cisco shares right now weaker by 7.5%. Walmart seems to be entering the crucial holiday shopping season on a high note. Company posted solid third-quarter sales and raised its full-year outlook. Even so, Walmart is down by more than 0.5%. Uber has been hit with a tax bill of nearly $650 million from the state of New Jersey for unemployment and disability insurance taxes. This really due to the fact that, according to the state's labor department, Uber had been misclassifying drivers as independent contractors. Uber right now is down 2%. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury yielding 1.80%. That is a look at markets. Back to Balance of Power. David Weston.
Thanks so much to Doug Krisner. Senator Elizabeth Warren has called for a federal statute that would subject corporations to criminal liability for misstatements to the public and the government. To take us through how this would fit with existing corporate disclosure requirements, we welcome now James Fanto, who's professor at the Brooklyn School of Law. So, Professor, welcome. Give us a sense, first of all, what is current federal law on the requirement of a public corporation to be straight with the government?
Well, you have SEC disclosure requirements, which are buttressed by anti-fraud and fines against the corporation and against any participant who misleads the market. So they're pretty rigorous, and they deal with our concern about fraud by public companies.
So how much would this Elizabeth Warren proposal actually change existing law? Is this more about electioneering, or would this be a substantive change?
Well, I mean, it would be a substantive change, but it's all about electioneering. I mean, it's something that I don't think would ever get through. It wouldn't work in practice because I think she really wants to aim at top executives and say, "Oh, we're going to catch you if you lie, and then we'll put you in jail." But that's just not going to work because to catch top executives in lies, you have to prove that they had knowing intent to lie, and often the top people, as seen in the recent Exxon trial, they're going to be insulated from whatever's happening way down below.
Well, exactly. I was thinking about the Exxon trial. Lay that out for us, because I thought it was a pretty extraordinary development when the prosecutor basically gave up part of his case at the very closing stages.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's just, she has this proposal, but if you look at the Exxon trial, the prosecutor gives up the proving that there was knowing intent to defraud, didn't go after individuals, which just underscores the fact of how difficult it is to show, to pick out individual people and say, oh yeah, they knowingly misled the public. Again, we have laws that will do that. We have the federal securities laws, which are civil, which can do that. But when you're going after someone criminally or going after the organization criminally, there's going to be a heightened standard of proof.
And to be clear, in the Exxon case, there's a state statute, the Martin Act, that evidently does not require an intent to mislead, and that was part of what was alleged against Exxon. But beyond that, they went to essentially common law fraud, but they didn't give it up. When they went to trial, that was still in the case. How could the prosecutor not have known he was going to back off by the time he went to trial? He'd had discovery.
Well, no, I'm sure they knew this. I don't think, frankly, I don't think it's a serious case against Exxon, and they knew that they were going to give this up. But prosecutors, particularly the New York AG, may get some mileage whether they prevail or not in this case.
As an officer of the court, is that responsible?
Well, I think they can. They can say with a straight face, look, we have the Martin Act, which is designed to prevent fraud. You don't literally have to go after organizations for intent to commit fraud. So, yeah, with a straight face, they can say, as an officer of the court, I'm just trying to protect New York investors from the potential for fraud.
Do we have a sense whether there is a broader issue with respect to disclosures to the government, particularly securities disclosures, of people sort of shading the truth, as it were?
I don't think we see that in practice. I mean, we constantly have issues where companies, are hiding things from the public, or things come out later. I mean, you can think of a number of examples, like Boeing could be one. But, I think we have a vigorous group of people who are, with the Securities and Exchange Commission, also with federal prosecutors, who are there really to look into, to dig this stuff out, to say nothing of the securities bar, that gets compensation for digging these sorts of things out. So whether we need something else, and a new criminal law always sounds good in a political environment, but they tend not to be very workable in practice.
By the way, don't we have a criminal law already, 18 U.S.C. 1001, that makes it a crime to knowingly lie to a federal official?
Absolutely, and there are countless criminal laws dealing with particular regulators. So why we need this is kind of puzzling to me.
Professor, perhaps a larger issue is which corporations are covered by the disclosure requirements, that is to say publicly traded companies. As we see increasingly, a lot of the economy is covered by private corporations that don't go public.
Okay, but then the question there is then who's going to be harmed by it? Because again, you may be worried about investors. Well, the normal investor doesn't invest in these private companies, and to the extent they do, there are protections for them. And then otherwise, we're worried about harm from products, but that's a traditional subject of tort law, or it's policed by a particular agency, and there may well be criminal sanctions for giving false information to a particular agency.
And sometimes criminal is an awfully blunt instrument. We saw that in Enron with the accounting firm, as I recall, right, where they got involved in a criminal investigation, and they essentially had to close up shop, as I recall.
Right, they had to close up shop. It turns out, then their conviction was overturned by the Supreme Court. Again, it's a blunt instrument. We're very protective of defendants in the criminal space. It's hard to go after these people. Again, we look at the financial crisis. How many criminal convictions were there? Well, very few. Again, it's something that politicians, particularly in an election year, pull out, but it's unlikely to solve many problems.
And in your experience, because you really are an expert in this, is it more effective to have civil remedies such as clawbacks?
I think it's much more effective to address compensation reforms. So things like clawbacks is a good example, and simply more attention to how people are compensated, because I think that goes more to the fundamental problem of what may be wrong in an organization.
Yeah, the question is whether that's anything the SEC can do anything about.
Well, they deal with it through disclosure. Congress from time to time tries to push more on disclosure, and we could always, you could have that as a platform where you say, give shareholder vote on compensation more of a bite.
Might not get as much attention, though. Okay, thanks very much to Professor James Fanto of the Brooklyn School of Law. Jobs, trade uncertainty, and growth. It was all on the agenda when Fed Chair Powell testified to the House Budget Committee today. We're going to talk with a third member of that committee. He is Representative Dan Kildee of the state of Michigan. That's all coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Hi, Susan. What's a Brew City Brew Bite?
It's Beer Munch.
Oh, all right, but what exactly is it?
It's Beer Munch.
Okay. But what about a Brew City Halloumi Fry?
It's Beer Munch.
And an onion straw?
It's Beer Munch.
Yeah, it's Beer Munch. Yeah, so you keep saying. Hot, shareable snacks. They're delicious with a cold beer and friends. You'll find them in the freezer aisle. Brew City.
It's Beer Munch. At TUI, we can help you find the perfect getaway for two. We fly to over 70 destinations worldwide, so wherever you have in mind, we'll help you get there. Book now and choose from thousands of holidays under $399 per person and pay £0 deposit when paying with direct debit. Book online or in-store with one of our travel experts. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's and put you in the middle. Offer available on selected holidays for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. At or protected.
Waiting for a phone that makes everything look crystal clear? Like a brilliant iPhone 8 with Retina display? The wait is over. Tesco Mobile's best ever Black Friday event is on. This week, get an iPhone 8 for just $23.49 a month, a saving of £144. Get yours by 17th of November. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Best ever Black Friday based on range of products in promotion was £27.49, now £23.49. 36-month credit agreement, rolling monthly usage agreement, subject to status, phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Rainy, 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 rainy.
Sergey, why are you in such a good mood?
It's raining.
And?
Rain means we take meal pups to cinema. And cinema means they'll be entertained.
Ah, and entertained means they're also quiet for a couple of hours. Oh, let's go. Enjoy more time together with 2-for-1 cinema tickets from Meerkat Movies with the Meerkat app. When you buy through Compare the Market.
Qualifying purchases, Tuesdays or Wednesdays, participating cinemas, 2 standard tickets only, cheapest free. T's and C's apply.
Good. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows videos and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something else, the road to 2020 is on TuneIn.
What a night! And a complete earthquake. This was
Follow every step of the Democratic primaries while hearing the latest headlines from the White House with live 24-hour news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News Talk, and more.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
Experience the election through the sources you trust with the nonstop news channels on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, Martin scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
And a move, and a shot, they stop!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we're seeing weakness in the stock market right now with the S&P and the Dow Industrial Average both down from record highs, a loss for each of about 0.1%. Similar drop for the NASDAQ Composite. Generally speaking, there's some growing concern about a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China and whether or not we're even going to see one in the near term. And then add to that some mixed eco data for the U.S. and very weak data for the Chinese economy overnight, kind of reinforcing concern that the trade war is really weighing on the global economy. Add to that a drop in many of the tech stocks after Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins yesterday pointed to political events in places like Hong Kong, China, Washington, and the UK helping to produce not only a lack of clarity, but a drop in business confidence as well. Cisco shares right now weaker by 7.5%. We're seeing shares in Uber down 2%. The company's been hit with a bill for nearly $650 million from the state of New Jersey for unemployment and disability insurance. The state's labor department saying that Uber had been misclassifying drivers as independent contractors. In the bond market right now, the U.S. 10-year Treasury down more than 7 basis points in yield. We're now at 1.81% on the 10-year. The dollar a little weak against the majors. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.1%. We're seeing a rally in the Japanese yen, though. 108.33. The gain against the greenback is 0.5% right now. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Balance of Power. David Weston.
Thank you so much to Doug Kisner. Live from the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Fed Chair Jay Powell testified before the House Budget Committee today, saying he saw no evidence of an imminent downturn, but warning of the dangers of borrowing faster than we're growing. We welcome now one of the members of that committee. He is Representative Dan Kildee, Democrat of Michigan, who also serves as Chief Deputy Whip. So, Mr. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. As you went into the meeting, what were you looking to learn, and did you learn it?
Well, obviously, we look for guidance from the Federal Reserve. Unlike the president, while I might have policy differences from time to time with Jay Powell, the chair, I think he's a very competent guy, and the Fed generally has done a good job. We look for signals that concern them. I think in one of the areas where Chair Powell expressed some concern is the uncertainty around global trade. And in particular, this is my interpretation, some of the uncertainties that this president has introduced into our trading relationships, I believe, contributes to that uncertainty. He sees that as a warning sign. I think he also made it clear when it comes to the issue of deficits that the best way to deal with deficits is to spur economic growth, to have growth at a pace that outpaces debt and deficits, rather than taking a max approach to our deficit issue, trying to do those things that stimulate growth. That led to a discussion on infrastructure. So I thought it was a productive conversation. We don't agree on everything, but this is a very thoughtful person.
On the first subject you raised, which is trade uncertainty, and certainly a lot of that is U.S.-China, but there's also the so-called USMCA, the successor to NAFTA, which is on the desk of Democrats such as yourself over in the House right now. Is that something that you could help the economy on by just getting that thing passed?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it would make a difference. The details matter, though, and so we're working through those details right now. Our trading relationships are critical, but we have to get it right. This is something we're going to have for a long time. So I think we all know that ultimately this is a choice between the old and the new agreement. We just want to make sure we have the best choice between those two.
As you say, he did raise the subject of the debt and deficit and made it clear that that is not something he can really address. He sort of put it back on the Congress, I thought, in saying you all have to come up with the right approach. You wouldn't pick particularly between like a balanced budget amendment or other approaches. Is there the appetite in the Budget Committee, your committee, to address seriously the deficit?
I think there is. I mean, the real struggle is this question between cuts versus stimulative investment. And many of us fall, in the category where we look at the impact that a major infrastructure investment would have on economic growth and also provide us with 21st century infrastructure. I think if we could see a real commitment, both from the president and some of our Republican allies on this, or colleagues, to take that step, then it would open the door, I think, for us to talk about fiscal policy in general. But what we're worried about, many of us, is that the cuts will be agreed to and reductions are agreed to, but no countervailing investment that makes sure that those cuts don't have really draconian impact on the people who are least likely to be able to get through without some additional help. And I think that's a real struggle for us.
Would a substantial investment in infrastructure pay for itself? And if so, over what period of time? We were told that the tax cuts we had a couple of years ago would pay for themselves through corporate investment. And I think we did see corporate investment go up for a time, but it's come back down again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at the real metrics. For every dollar that we invested in tax cuts, we get about 32 cents back in economic output. Obviously, that's a plus, but it's not enough to cover the cost of the cut. With infrastructure, for every dollar we invest in infrastructure, most economists believe we get something like $1.60 return. So it's about being smart. Often I think the issue of debt is one that is seen as a monolithic issue. There's a difference between debt on someone's credit card and mortgage debt. And I think this is where an investment in infrastructure looks a lot more like a mortgage on a home, because there's a countervailing asset on the other side of the balance sheet. Whereas the tax cuts, while they may have had some stimulative effect, they really have kicked the can down the road. Most of the cost will be paid for in future years. The benefit is being realized right now. In the long term, that's not a successful formula.
Congressman, I asked you what you hope to learn. Did you also want to send a message? Because you asked a rather pointed question about the president. The president tried to really put some pressure on Jay Powell, and this is how he responded.
I'm going to stick with my policy of not commenting, other than to say that it's very, very important that the public understands that we do our work on a nonpartisan, non-political basis, based on the best thinking, the best analysis. We try to be transparent and explain ourselves, and we don't take political considerations in one way or the other. We serve all Americans in a completely non-political way.
Were you trying to send a message that you sort of had his back when it comes to potential influence for the president?
For sure. I think he needs to know that at least one branch of government will not default to really derisive name-calling, which the president has done. Actually, one time speculated whether Jay Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, or Chairman Xi in China was the worst enemy. I think that kind of talk doesn't do anybody any good. And I don't think it sends a productive message to business leaders that are looking to make investments when the president is criticizing what has been one of the more stable elements of our government over the last couple of decades, and that's the Federal Reserve. I think it's important that he know that while we don't necessarily agree with him, we respect him, and we think he's actually done a really good job given the circumstances that he's faced.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time. I understand you got to go vote. I don't want to get in the way of the nation's business. So thank you. That is Chief Deputy Whip, Representative Dan Kildee of Michigan. And now we look forward to what's coming up on Bloomberg Business Week. I understand you have a different co-host. You're going west again on me.
I'm going west. I've been all over the place this week. David West in the absence of Carol Massar. Taylor Riggs is going to be alongside me, at least virtually. We're going to talk about the news today, talk a little bit about Walmart earnings out there. Market doesn't totally love it. We're going to talk about the new episode of Trillions. That's the ETF podcast. Talk about Hong Kong protests, and after the bell, NVIDIA coming out with earnings. And you'll be interested in this. Ethical gift giving. You know, the holidays are right around the corner. We've got an expert who's going to tell us about that, as if gift giving wasn't complicated enough.
Yeah,
I know like cherry's probably not that easy to buy.
I don't have enough to feel guilty about. I need another thing like Christmas gifts I can feel guilty about now. Exactly.
We do what we can for you,
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. Yeah, but the NVIDIA will be interesting on the heels of Cisco, because Cisco really took it in the neck.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Really
because it's such an interesting window into enterprise demand and consumer demand as well.
Well, that's the concern. Is it the virtual the canary in the coal mine?
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Something we hope it's not, but it didn't look good. Okay, thank you so much to Jason Kelly, and he's going to be joined by Taylor Riggs on Bloomberg Business Week coming up next. In the meantime, that does it for Balance of Power for today. I'm David Weston. Thank you so very much for joining us on Bloomberg Radio.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet and scores us down.
The top of the Big 12 is at stake. Reigning champion Oklahoma travels to Waco, Texas to take on the surprising undefeated Baylor Bears. The action kicks off this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Listen to every call and every game of your school all season long for free on TuneIn. Just search college to listen today.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s,
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
This could be an example of a fund that made a ton of money off the volatility.
Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine.
I will honestly say that it sounds like people are a bit confused.
Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
I have a prediction that Apple is going to be the best performing FANG stock in 2019.
East Coast, West Coast rivalry. It's not just about the rap game anymore.
Bloomberg Business Week. with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City and the 960 studio in San Francisco. It's an East Coast, West Coast edition of Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Jason Kelly, alongside virtually Taylor Riggs. Hey, Tay.
It's so great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. And we were just talking about what's moving the market. Walmart, certainly people paying attention to that. And of course, you see tech wherever you go.
Well, I do, because Walmart is, of course, a Walmart story, but it's also an e-commerce story. It is taking on the grocery business, taking on Amazon, their Whole Foods business head on. So you know me, I could relate anything back to technology these days, and Walmart managing to do it.
That's right. Everything used to be tech, or used to be markets for you. Now it's all tech markets. You're so multi-talented. Looking forward to spending some time with you today. First, let's get to Doug Krisner. He's got an update on the trade. Hey, Doug.
Yeah, right now from the Bloomberg Terminal, Jason, the central bank in Mexico has cut its overnight rate from 7.75% down to 7%. Stateside, we're seeing a weakness in the equity market. We had some mixed eco data in the U.S. this morning, along with growing concern over the fate of a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Overnight, some very weak data on the Chinese economy, although Bloomberg Intelligence indicating it really is a story about deceleration and not about collapse. Most heavily traded right now, Cisco Systems stock is down about 7.5%. I guess in the old days they call it Cisco Systems. Today it's just Cisco. Last night after the bell, the company delivered earnings that were disappointing, and then on top of that, CEO Chuck Robbins pointed to a lot of geopolitical events around the world, Hong Kong, China, Washington, D.C., the U.K., for helping to produce a lack of clarity and a commensurate decline in business confidence. You'll talk about the Walmart story in a moment. Those shares are down 0.8%. Uber has been hit with a tax bill of nearly $650 million by the state of New Jersey for unemployment and disability insurance taxes. Uber shares right now weaker by about 2%. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury down more than 7 basis points in yield, 1.81% on the 10-year. A little bit of dollar weakness today, although we're seeing with this risk-off mood in markets a rally in the yen to 108.30. You guys are caught up on markets. Back to you.
Doug Krisner, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly in New York, Taylor Riggs out in San Francisco. And Taylor, we're going to kick off a new weekly segment this week, courtesy of Johns Hopkins, the Bloomberg School there, you know, where it gets its name. We're going to talk a little bit about the opioid crisis, sort of the shape of that and what we may need to be doing to help combat it. We're also going to take you to the Arctic. This is a tech story. It's the cover of Bloomberg Business Week this week. Have you read this story yet?
Well, you know, I interviewed Ashley Vance last night on Bloomberg Tech about this story.
Always a step ahead, Taylor.
Learn to keep up. San Francisco's ahead of you this time. This is fascinating. And it, not only is it about storing software in our bunker, but it is a debate about open source code.
Right.
And that's where we can really get into Ashley Vance, who's been covering open source coding for 20 years.
All right. Well, and we're going to end the show, Taylor, with some good advice. I know you're already thinking what you want to buy me for Christmas. And it's very important to me that you are very ethical when you do this. So we're going to have an ethical gift buying guide, courtesy of the founder of Noonday. So lots to look forward to. I'll be on the lookout for, something to buy you as well.
Always appreciate it.
Our friends are here to set the Business Week agenda. Joe Weisenthal, markets editor for Bloomberg. He's also the co-host of What'd You Miss? That's coming up at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. And Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg, author of The Chart and the Stock of the Day. Dave, I want to start with you. What's capturing your attention in the market today? What's the one thing people need to know?
Well, Walmart kind of kicking off retail earnings, and initially the numbers were well received, and it's understandable. You had sales at U.S. stores open more than a year, other than gasoline, up 3.2%. That's relatively strong growth by historical standards, and yet Walmart shares have not been able to hang on to their gains. They're lower by 0.75%. And let's put it this way. Contrast that with Cisco Systems, as Doug Krisner was talking about. That stock's down almost 8%. So it looks like one of those days where people are kind of looking for the worst out of results, or at least not satisfied with what they're getting, which is interesting because if you look at the third quarter earnings season overall, it's been a very different story. For the most part, companies have gotten the benefit of the doubt when they've had, any kinds of issues with their earnings. And, when the results were positive, you'd see the shares pop up. So, today, kind of not so great, especially if you're thinking about the retailers who are really going to be dominating next week in terms of reporting.
So, Joe, when you take a look at companies like Walmart, which continue to do very well, and then Cisco, which cites a global macro slowdown, and then we get headlines about the U.S. and China are struggling to close phase one of the deal. How much, to be honest, some companies are doing very well, some companies aren't. How much of these companies are really trading on these trade headlines? We've been trying to close this deal for 2 months.
I think it's kind of interesting that there's been a lot of optimism over the last several weeks, this extremely fast run up. Now, we've got headlines 2 days in a row suggesting they can't quite do this. But these have not been like big sell-offs or anything. Look, what are we off right now? Like less than 0.1%. So I do find it striking that even signs that the phase one deal, which was never very ambitious in the first place. The whole point of phase one, I thought, was essentially that, this will just be something that we can say was deal-ish to save all the hard stuff. We apparently can't even get the easy stuff done too easily, and yet we're still right here hanging extremely close to all-time highs. I think it says something about the underlying buoyancy of this market and the fact that, it wasn't very long ago that the R word recession was on many people's lips as being a very real risk. And now people don't perceive that to be a risk. And so maybe that change in sentiment about the underlying economy itself, more than phase one or phase two or whatever, is really the key thing here. And just to the earnings point, the cloud thing, Cisco, look, that is actually a story that's well beyond Cisco and some of the changing perspectives to some of these tech giants and infrastructure spending. Yeah. But it's a tech thing, and I think people are saying this is not necessarily an econ thing, but about a sort of a surprisingly contained area of the economy.
All right, so Taylor, what's the one thing you want to make sure people know about?
Well, for me, it's all technology over here. So we're covering Uber, we're covering Bitcoin, we're covering blockchain, we're covering hiring over in the IT market. But I think it's just been, for me, all about tech. And so I'm curious from Dave Wilson, if I've been obsessed with technology these past few months, what's the one thing I've been missing if I haven't been paying attention?
In tech or elsewhere? Elsewhere? What you've been missing is that, shall we say, the bond proxies, the utility stocks, the real estate investment trust, to some extent the makers of consumer staples, food, beverage, tobacco. They've kind of lost their place as market leaders, and that's consistent with what Joe was talking about when it comes to an easing of concern, at the very least, that the U.S. economy is headed into a recession. And, because of that, you've seen yields go up. You've seen a bit less demand for the alternatives provided in stocks if you're looking for income. So that would be certainly one thing that's changed.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg, and he'll be back later with the chart and stock of the day. Joe Weisenthal, markets editor for Bloomberg, headed off to do some TV. What'd you miss? Coming up at 4 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Television. And Taylor, for you and me, coming up, we're going to talk a little more Walmart. Matt Boyle and Jennifer Bartashis is going to be along to break that down for us. In the meantime, let's get to Bob Moon. He's got your world's national headlines. Goodness gracious, Bob, what am I doing?
Jason,
over to you.
Yet again, gunfire brings death to an American high school today in the Los Angeles suburb of Santa Clarita. Authorities say one student, a girl, was killed. 2 boys are in critical condition, and another male is in good condition. The L.A. County Sheriff says the suspect is a student and is one of those taken to the hospital after this morning's shooting at Saugus High School. And like so many times before, we are hearing the accounts of school kids in shock, speaking as they tend to do under stress like this, almost in unison.
We grabbed our friends and we just ran.
We had no idea where we were going to go. We just knew to get out.
Many anxious parents are still awaiting reunification with their children at that high school 30 miles northwest of Los Angeles. Just today, in El Paso, Texas, the Walmart, where a gunman killed 22 people earlier this year, reopened. The whistleblower is beside the point now. His report raising concerns over what he had heard about President Trump's actions with Ukraine has now been corroborated, but Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports that has become a further partisan point of contention.
Chairman Adam Schiff says his hearing no longer needs the whistleblower because the people who gave him the information are now testifying. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
He lied when he told the American public he did not know who this whistleblower was. He had an opportunity that the whistleblower could come forward to actually get the information.
Speaker.
And that is Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reporting from Capitol Hill. Those hearings resume tomorrow. Global News 24 hours a day on air and TikTok, on Twitter. I'm Bob Moon.
You don't usually find the titans of finance, business, and politics sitting around together.
There's been this transfer of royal power and royal prerogative.
But amazingly, they're nearly all here every weekday.
Let's talk about their data. What are you looking for?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
So where does the circuit breaker come from?
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
He's got to respond, doesn't he?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Join us in New York City on November 21st as Bloomberg Pursuits convenes the second annual The Year Ahead Luxury. Speakers include Jennifer Hyman, CEO Rent the Runway, Alessandro Bogliolo, CEO Tiffany & Company, Robert A.M. Stern, renowned architect. Supporting sponsor, Diamond Producers Association. Participating sponsor, St. Regis Hotels and Resorts. For more information, go to BloombergLive.com/TYA Luxury. Invitation code RADIO.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In-depth.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
It's never nice missing out. But millions are doing just that by having a current account that doesn't pay them any interest on their hard-earned money. TSB is here to help. They offer interest to all their Plus account customers for no monthly fee. So if you're one of the millions of people who are missing out, talk to TSB. Terms and conditions apply.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Asda this Christmas, treat them to a gift or two, or three, with 3 for 2 on a wide range of beauty and toiletry gift sets from Dove, Lynx, Bayliss and Harding and many more. Asda, let's make Christmas extra special. Selected stores online subject to availability. Individual prices £1 to £20. Cheapest item free.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
You're listening to TuneIn, where you can hear all the audio you love in one place. Live NFL games, the hottest music, breaking news, and podcasts. Push play and go about your day, only on TuneIn.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. New Weekly magazine says Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom are considering getting married in Egypt because they enjoyed their vacation there so much. Speaking of weddings, Naughty Gossip claims Jennifer Lopez is allegedly trying to get someone to pay for her wedding. A source tells the website there's no way she is paying for that wedding and even less chance of her wasting one of the biggest press days of her life without harnessing it to help her business. To hear music from Katy Perry and Jennifer Lopez, search today's hits on TuneIn.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The Federal Trade Commission started a preliminary investigation into Visa and MasterCard over debit card transactions. Bloomberg's reporting it's looking at whether these companies barred merchants from using other debit networks. Ferrari wants you, Porsche buyer. It's unveiled a new sports coupe aimed at those who would buy a Porsche 911, part of an overhaul.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Much of the U.S. equity market is hovering just below record highs. We had some mixed economic data here in the States earlier, and I'm more concerned about the extent to which we will see a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Overnight, eco data for the Chinese economy a bit on the weak side, particularly the industrial production number. Bloomberg Intelligence was saying it really highlights deceleration more than it does outright collapse. Right now, Dow Industrial Average is off about 0.1%. Most heavily traded at this hour, Cisco. Stocks down nearly 7%. The company issued some disappointing earnings last night after the bell. And then on top of that, CEO Chuck Robbins pointed to a number of geopolitical events around the world that have worked in concert to kind of produce not only a lack of clarity, but a drop in business confidence. Walmart entering the crucial holiday season on a high note, posting very solid third quarter sales, extending its streak of sales growth to 5 years. And at the same time, Walmart raised its full year outlook yet again. Despite that fact, or those facts, the stock is down about 0.8%. Fed Chair Jay Powell was speaking earlier to one of the committees in the House today. He called the American economy a star performer, and he voiced confidence in the record expansion staying on track. In spite of that fact, we've got the U.S. 10-year Treasury down a little bit in yield terms, off by about 7 basis points to 1.81%. That's a look at markets. Jason and Taylor, back to you.
Thank you. And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, well, as you just heard Doug describe Walmart certainly catching attention because, well, it's Walmart, and we pay attention to what they say about the health of the consumer, the health of the world, and some of those geo-economic to geopolitical concerns as well. Let's get into it with Matthew Boyle, U.S. retail reporter for Bloomberg. He's here with me in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, and Jennifer Bartashis. She is senior U.S. retail staples and restaurant analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. She's on the phone from BI headquarters down in Princeton. Matt, let me start with you. We got the numbers from Doug, but what jumped out at you as you were synthesizing this? You know this company so well. Give us the nuance here.
Well, that's the thing. It's the synthesis that matters here. I mean, we first saw the top line numbers, the sales beat. They raised guidance. We're like, okay, this is going to be another good quarter for Walmart. But as the day wore on, as you can see now, the shares are down. And it's a combination of some old concerns and some new ones. The old ones, of course, are gross margins. All these wonderful things Walmart's doing online, next day delivery, sending groceries even into your house, be delivered in your fridge while you're at work. These are all great, but they're very expensive. Right. So profitability, gross margins were down again this quarter. But then there's some new concerns. You've got a management reshuffle. You have no leader right now at their Sam's Club warehouse division, their Costco copycat. And Sam's Club had a really poor quarter. Sales missed. Profit was down. So you've got some new concerns as well. We're heading into the holiday season. Everybody needs to be at the top of their game. Right. So people were looking to poke some holes, and it looks like they found some.
Well, Jennifer, while investors might be poking some holes, your smart note says that Walmart continues to invest in the long run at the expense of near-term earnings, and this is the right approach in your view. Why?
Yeah, so long term, Walmart has if they want to be competitive long term, especially against rising competitors and the Amazon.coms of the world, then the investment in the structure and the infrastructure and the business to build an e-commerce business is a necessary evil, and that is weighing down on short-term earnings. And everybody sort of expected that. Matt makes a great point that gross margin, is still remains a concern, but it's not a new concern. And instead, I think one of the other things that is coming out of today's earnings is just the idea that e-commerce growth that Walmart is seeing is right now heavily skewed to food. And investors, over time would like to see a greater dependence on merchandise, which is higher margin, to help make that business a little bit less of a drag on the rest of the entity.
And so, Matt, as you look ahead, especially to the next few months, what does Walmart need to do? What are the proof points that may get investors a little bit more on side?
Well, it's not just what they need to do, it's what they need to stop doing. They've stopped making these acquisitions of small, digitally native sites, things like Bonobos, ModCloth, Moose Jaw. That was a key element of
so many of those just sound made up. Right? Yeah. Like we're in some dystopian science fiction retail.
Well, the jobs at some of them seem to be made up these days because they've already sold ModCloth, Jet Black, which was a very expensive experiment in sort of text-based commerce. We've heard is on the block. So they're going to be stopping making those acquisitions. What they need to start doing is selling more apparel, selling more home goods, things that Target, their rival, is very, very good at and has done for years. Walmart is trying to get deeper into those two categories, but it's a stretch. When you think of cheap chic, you think of Target, not Walmart.
Jennifer, I understand that investors don't like the lower margin e-grocery business, except this appears to be the one area where Walmart is leading Amazon. Amazon has to play catch up in the grocery space. They're going out, they're trying to build a brick and mortar grocery store because that curbside pickup feels like it's starting to become more popular than the grocery delivery that Amazon is known for. Why not double down in Walmart's case on that e-grocery delivery because it feels like they're such a leader in that space?
Well, I will say I don't think Walmart's really slowing down on grocery or e-grocery. They're continuing to expand the number of stores where you can do click and collect or the number of locations that will deliver to people's homes. But you're right, it is a competitive advantage that I think they want to be defensive about. And so it's great that it's booming so much for them. And when you look at Walmart versus Amazon, in terms of geographic distribution, Amazon does well enough when you're talking about urban areas where lots of people don't own cars and they want to have things delivered to their house, including groceries. But the power of click and collect is that it really uses the store base to really get to mainstream non-urban America, and those consumers are responding as well. It's just that over time, you'd like to see the overall e-commerce balance pick up a little bit more in the non-food side as well.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Lots more to look at with Walmart. Never an easy or a straightforward story in many ways, owing to its size, scope, and importance around the world, certainly here in the United States. Jennifer Bartashis is Senior U.S. Retail Staples and Restaurants Analyst for BI. She joined us on the phone from Bloomberg Intelligence headquarters in Princeton. And Matthew Boyle, Matt Boyle, U.S. Retail Reporter for Bloomberg, here with me in New York City. Well, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about the opioid epidemic through the lens of an expert down at Johns Hopkins. It's part of a new weekly series we are starting. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week from Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. The world is awash in debt. The Institute of International Finance reports global debt hit a new record in the first half of 2019, topping $250 trillion. The U.S. and China led the way, accounting for more than 60% of new borrowing. It's another lackluster day on Wall Street in what has been a lackluster week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 36, the S&P 500 down 1, the Nasdaq Composite is down 11. Houlihan's Restaurants has filed for bankruptcy. Landry's, which operates Joe's Crab Shack, Morton's, and others, is offering $40 million for the casual dining chain, setting a floor for any other offers that emerge in a bankruptcy sale. Tesla's Model 3 and Model S sedans are back on Consumer Reports' recommended list. The cars earned an average rating in the magazine's annual reliability survey, but still ranked 23rd overall. Top honors went to Lexus, Mazda, and Toyota. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The Federal Trade Commission started a preliminary investigation into Visa and MasterCard over debit card transactions. Bloomberg's reporting it's looking at whether these companies barred merchants from using other debit networks. Ferrari wants you, Porsche buyer. It's unveiled a new sports coupe aimed at those who would buy a Porsche 911, part of an overhaul.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
Stuck in traffic during the big game? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to your favorite NFL team on the go. No TV required. Even during rush hour, you won't miss a single touchdown. Listen to the NFL on TuneIn Premium today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet and scores this down.
The top of the Big 12 is at stake. Reigning champion Oklahoma travels to Waco, Texas to take on the surprising undefeated Baylor Bears. The action kicks off this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Listen to every call and every game of your school all season long for free on TuneIn. Just search college to listen today.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap. The give Jones up the middle. Runs it back. He's to the 10 to the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown.
Today, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Getting pressure again. Rolls to his right. Fakes. He's going to run with it. He's a 5. He got touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
A move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Billboard.com did a CMA Awards 2019 predictions. Their experts picked who should win and who will win. Probably. Although I think the whole world knows one slam dunk is Carrie Underwood winning Entertainer of the Year. Meanwhile, Reba McEntire is going on tour next year. She'll kick it off on March 20th in Evansville, Indiana, and take it into early May. You can grab details at Reba.com. To hear more music from Carrie Underwood and Reba, search Country Roads on TuneIn.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Taylor Riggs. And coming up, we're going to kick off a new weekly series on the issues in the world of health and medicine. The Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement at Johns Hopkins University is going to join us, talk a little bit about the opioid crisis. In the meantime, let's talk to Doug Krisner. He's got an update on the trade. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Jason. A little bit of weakness right now in the equity market. We had some mixed economic news, and add to that growing concern about the extent to which we will or won't see a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Right now, the Dow is off from a record by 0.1%. S&P down by a similar amount, also off from a record high, and the Nasdaq Composite is weaker by 0.1%. Tech shares being hurt by the weak earnings last night from Cisco. Those shares most heavily traded right now, weaker by 7.8%. And Walmart, which earlier in the day reports posted third quarter sales that were above estimates, but there seems to be concern about persistent weakness at Sam's Club, along with concern about slowing progress in trying to diversify Walmart sales beyond groceries. Shares in Walmart right now weaker by 0.8%. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury down more than 7 basis points in yield. We are at 1.81%. That's a quick look at markets. Back to you guys on Bloomberg Business Week.
And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's head down to Baltimore. Dr. Josh Sharfstein joins us. He is Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement and the Director of the Bloomberg American Health Initiative at Johns Hopkins University. And as you can probably tell by the name, the Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, of course, the founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies, Bloomberg LP being the parent of Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Radio. Dr. Sharfstein, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we talk a lot about the opioid crisis from many different angles. It's an economic story. It's obviously a very important social and really human story. Give us a sense of where we are right now. And as you look back, maybe we start there. What could we have done to essentially prevent this in some cases? What's the lesson that we learn here?
Well, I think there are a few lessons. This is a crisis that is now largely responsible for the reduction in life expectancy over the last 3 years, which is the first time that's happened since World War I and the Great Influenza. And so it's having this enormous impact in communities of all kinds across the country. There are probably a few different points in time where intervention would have made a difference. Most recently, for this current version, the huge increase in prescribing of opioids for pain was a major factor, and the fact that it took a long time for the medical community to wake up to the fact that the culture of medicine in a way changed, and doctors were prescribing 4 or 5 times what they've been prescribing before, and a lot of patients got in trouble.
So, Doctor, I'm out here in San Francisco, and we talk about big data and data privacy, and it sounds great, but it does bring up a lot of concerns. What is your solution to fold data into the conversation about how now to help the problem?
Well, I think there have been a couple great examples of states that are using data to identify the risk factors for overdose, and more importantly, in my mind, the opportunities to intervene and help people. So I'd call out Massachusetts and Maryland. Massachusetts did a great big data project where they merged in their data from corrections with the data from the healthcare, as well as data from fatalities from the coroner, medical examiner. And what they found, for example, was that people who had been incarcerated were at over 100 times the risk of dying of an overdose when they got out compared to the general population. But when those same people were given treatment with medications, there was a dramatic drop in their risk of death. The Maryland data has found that the highest risk individuals for overdose death are people who have actually been in the emergency room and the hospital, as well as had contact with the criminal justice system. And what I think makes both of those findings very interesting is that by and large, hospitals, the medical community, and jails have failed to provide life-saving treatment. They often don't offer it to people who need it. And I think big data analyses are sort of a wake-up call to the medical community and to criminal justice that every contact with someone is an opportunity actually to get people into effective care.
Dr. Sharfstein, it's interesting, as we think about the solutions here. I spent yesterday at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum on a security summit. And, one of the continuous themes there was this cooperation between the public side and the private sector. And a lot of what it sounds like you're talking about does rely on a public sector solution in many ways, but also private industry coming in. How does that work? How does it happen in your estimation?
So the Massachusetts analysis I mentioned was actually done in a consortium, a public-private consortium. Dr. Monica Burrell is Commissioner of Health in Massachusetts, and she brought in, with the governor, a number of tech companies to help them really do the right analysis. I'll be honest with you, there are some clouds on the horizon in this big data world. There's, sometimes I think companies will take data and they'll show up and say, let's tell the doctor the percentage chance that the person right in front of them is going to overdose, and maybe they won't prescribe something. Those things I think might be a little bit fraught. I'd like to see the public-private partnership where the public sector can actually pause and say, is this a good idea? Will this make the care better or worse? And you have sort of the technology and the skills from the private sector, but kind of the judgment and the sense of the overall problem that the public sector brings.
What about HIPAA violations and data privacy rules?
Well, most of these analyses are done at an aggregate level, so you're not using the individual's names. There is the risk, though, of course, that data systems can be compromised, and it's very important that when analyses are being done that, there are a lot of data security standards. For me, the core question is the analysis that's going to be done, conceived of correctly, and is it going to be helpful to people? For example, I'm aware of some, ideas where people say, if somebody has had a problem, with being arrested years in the past, then we won't ever give them an opioid again. Well, that could backfire in a lot of different ways. The person may really be in pain and need treatment, and if they don't get it, they may go out and have to use, drugs on the street and be at much greater risk of death. So I really think the key is, not just following the law, but having a really good idea. And I think it's the public-private partnership there that can make sure that we steer away from the bad ideas.
All right. Well, it's a great overview, and we appreciate the context so much. Thank you. Dr. Josh Sharfstein, he is Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement and the Director of the Bloomberg American Health Initiative at Johns Hopkins University. He joined us on the phone from Baltimore. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk a little macro, Taylor, get a sense of where the market may be going, especially as we look toward the end of a year where volatility has only reared its ugly head a couple times. We'll see what may be in store for us in the coming months. In the meantime, let's get to Bob Moon. He's got some world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. A student gunman opened fire early today at a Southern California high school, leaving one student, a girl, dead, and two other students, boys, in critical condition. The student with the gun also hospitalized. It happened at Saugus High School in Santa Clarita, about 30 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. A 16-year-old student said she was in her Spanish class working on homework when she heard 4 gunshots that she initially mistook as instruments from a band class. She said a student burst into the room, saying he'd seen the gunman, and the students in the classroom all ran. Government investigators who uncovered child exploitation initiated more than 4,000 cases around the world in 2019, resulting in thousands of arrests and the identification of more than 1,000 victims, according to data obtained by the Associated Press. The caseloads are growing because of